Oh,
Good morning, Matt.
welcome to the DMZ, everybody. It's gonna be 90 degrees here in southern DMZ today.
It is summer-like in northern DMZ as well, as is New England's way. We're just skipping right past summer, skipping right past spring, straight from winter to summer. We were getting snow in mid-April, and now we're in the upper 80s last couple days. But not a lot of complaining up here.
It is polo season here in southern DMZ. I see you're still wearing your military fatigues.
The revolution is alive and well in Western Massachusetts. So we are taping on Thursday. Usually we are behind the curve on news because all the craziness dumps on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And that could well happen again.
There's also usually, 7 or 8 hour lag from the time we record this.
Right.
Maybe less. But
so it's a dangerous schedule we're on in Trump's America. But it seems like maybe we're well timed because Rudy Giuliani had his insane news drop Wednesday night. And so perhaps we can have a timely conversation.
unless that was just a harbinger of things to come. Maybe that was just the appetizer to whet our appetite.
Do you understand the logic behind? I mean, what Rudy seemed to be trying to do is, let's clear this all up. You know, here's why Michael said what he said. He was very careful in his wording that he wasn't paid by the campaign of the Trump organization. That's because he was paid by Trump himself. Donald Trump was totally on the level when he said 10 days ago he didn't know about it because he didn't know about it. Some of his people took the money from his private kitty, paid Michael Cohen on retainer to reimburse him for his costs. So nobody lied. There's no campaign finance violations here because this isn't campaign finance related. It's out of private money. Nothing to see here. Is anybody going to buy this?
I don't know. I think some people will. I'm at the crazy like a fox level right now. I don't know what Rudy is up to. Obviously, Rudy. I mean, I would say just the Rudy. Let's put aside what just happened, but the Rudy phenomenon is an interesting one. I mean, this is a guy who did something in New York that was pretty amazing. Got elected as a Republican. He then proceeded to clean up New York City and make it habitable again. Then he, after 9/11, becomes America's mayor. So this is a guy who, and he wrote a book called Leadership that is actually pretty good. I mean, if one studies leadership. So this is a guy who had, at a moment in time, was Churchillian. And now seems to be completely unhinged. But it makes me wonder, though, he's obviously a smart dude, and so maybe there's like a method to the madness.
It's hard to think of somebody who inflicted so many self-inflicted wounds to destroy what had been a pretty golden reputation. And I think for someone on the left, the initial golden reputation wasn't deserved. But you couldn't make that argument against Rudy Giuliani successfully, before 9/11 or shortly thereafter. Because there was that perception that he turned around something that was uninhabitable. I mean, there are people, if you get deep into the New York City weeds, would say, look, David Dinkins was doing a good job, didn't get the credit on his watch. Rudy took the credit for some things that Dinkins did, and now people who are pro Giuliani or pro Bloomberg are dumping on Bill de Blasio when in fact the metrics in New York City are quite good his watch too. So you can't credit things like broken windows theory. Let's get rid of the squeegee guys, and all of a sudden everything will be magical in New York. That was very flimsy thinking, and there's all sorts of other reasons why things were actually better in New York than they were. You can sort of make those arguments about Giuliani now because he has become such a punchline And I mean, which really begins, in my opinion, with Joe Biden's takedown of Giuliani in the 2008 presidential campaign. I mean, Giuliani at this point was a nominal frontrunner, although it was a relatively weak field.
Well, in fairness, he had the brilliant strategy of losing Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina on the way to winning with the theory that then you would win Florida.
Well, I mean, Giuliani got twisted around because he had built himself up in New York City as a relatively liberal Republican, a pro-choice, pro-immigrant Republican. He didn't stick to that running for president in 2008, so you started to see Giuliani the panderer, less Giuliani the leader who talks straight. And then Joe Biden comes out saying every sentence of this guy's mouth is a noun or verb in 9/11, which, almost if any other politician said that, the blowback would have been on that guy. But when Biden said it, it seemed like you have delivered a piercing insight into this phony politician, and now we all see it. And I don't think Giuliani ever recovered from that barb.
Yeah.
I mean, on top of the fact
that
it
also rang true. Yeah. I mean, he had been doing that. I also think, Bill, a week or two ago, you and I had this discussion about how Trump likes characters and caricatures, right? Remember?
Yeah.
And I was talking about Michael Cohen being sort of like the Goodfellas, guy, and like how they're sort of like these archetypes. Rudy Giuliani's that way. He's become a caricature of himself.
Yeah.
And I think Trump likes that.
He does. I mean, I think he likes caricatures. He likes big personalities. He likes people who are on TV, who can handle themselves on TV well from a entertainment perspective. And by all accounts, Trump seems to actually equate competence and intelligence by TV skills. And Giuliani is a classic example of the opposite. That the fact that he can be pugnacious and controversial on TV, be a good talking head who can mix things up, is unmoored from his actual knowledge of an issue, his ability to dispense good legal advice, his ability to govern properly. There's actually no connection between the two things.
But I do think, this is a guy, was he a U.S. attorney in New York? He took down the mob, I think. I mean, this is not a guy who just is a talking head or even just a politician. I mean, Rudy Giuliani has or had legal chops at some point.
But it makes you question your perception of that. Obviously, the reputation that he had was here's a guy who took down the mob, an Italian American who took down the mob, which is not for nothing in New York City. He clearly rode that to become mayor and was seen as a competent mayor. But then when you watch the guy now saying things, removing from the Trump stuff recently, other stuff he said about race and about immigration, about Hillary Clinton.
Remember,
it's all just the most thinly ridiculous, baseless attacks like any other right-wing troll. It makes you question, how good was this guy in the first place? Was he being buffeted by other people's good work and showboating and taking the credit? Because if he was actually that good at what he did, why would he be behaving this way now?
Well, I'm very curious about those incentives, too. I mean, why is it that Newt Gingrich became the Newt Gingrich today? Why is it that Rudy Giuliani became the Rudy Giuliani today? They could have gone a different direction. Rudy could have played his cards differently, and I guess maybe the fact that no one's heard anything out of Colin Powell for a while is actually a sign of what happens if you don't go that direction, right? I mean, a cautionary tale almost. But Rudy, it seems like, could have ridden off into the sunset as this just heroic. He could have made a lot of money giving speeches about
anything he did.
I'm sure he cashed in too, but you get my point. Like, he could have he didn't have to have this sort of final chapter, which I think is going to redefine how his entire legacy, right?
I see the same in Chris Christie. I mean, Chris Christie I mean, I think was a horrible governor and a horrible presidential candidate and a generally horrible person. But when you see him when you did see him in a town hall setting, he was clearly knowledgeable. He clearly had lots of facts, nuanced facts at times about running his state at his fingertips. I would say I've seen Chris Christie speak more in depth about policy than I have with Rudy Giuliani per se, and yet he chose to govern in such a bullying and arguably corrupt manner that he self-immolated. He self-immolated in the campaign. He trashed his state. He made spiteful decisions on things like the Gateway Project in New Jersey, which seemed to be done strictly for political reasons, not for what was best for his constituents in the New York City region. Also got twisted around on more moderate positions that he once held to try to pander to the Republican electorate. And now this guy has the goal. I don't know if we want to get into the whole White House Correspondents' Dinner because it's a little stale at this point.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing Chris Christie being a talking head on Stephanopoulos' show saying, we'd have more civility and decency in politics, and how dare Michelle Wolf say these mean things. Chris Christie tried to make a political career based on bullying, insulting, general obnoxiousness, dressed up as truth-telling, and had that and fell under the weight of that thinking, and now he's going to lecture us on decency. It's ridiculous.
Well, what makes me wonder is, now you could imagine a world where Rudy Giuliani and Newt Gingrich and maybe Chris Christie, but certainly Newt and Rudy go on to be sort of like statesmen and sort of wise old men, who are sort of universally respected on both sides of the aisle. Yes, they have a perspective, but they would be a better witness in a sense for the cause of conservatism. You can imagine a scenario or a world where that happens. But obviously it hasn't or doesn't happen. I mean, there are people who go that route, like Brent Scowcroft, or, I mean, I would even argue that Colin Powell has messed up his opportunity to do that, and maybe going in the opposite direction. And the same thing with Condi Rice. I mean, the last thing I heard about her was how great Rex Tillerson was, So there's different ways to ruin a good legacy. During your sort of twilight years. But I guess my point is, going back to Rudy and Newt, I mean, I wonder if this is a product of like a selection, whereas the kinds of people who become Rudy and Newt are predisposed to be either hacks who will go with whatever way the wind is blowing, or self-immolation, or if this is an incentive problem. Like, is the problem that we have a world where the Fox Newses of the world and the Republican primary voters had created these perverse incentives, and so you're not only is it destroying young up-and-coming conservative leaders, but it's also destroying the legacies and the reputation of erstwhile Republican leaders.
Well, Condi and Colin Powell are lower key, dignified people who care deeply about policy, but yet exercise some very poor policy judgments at critical moments in their careers, and have suffered the consequences for that. Gingrich, Giuliani, Christie are bombastic megalomaniacs who
tell me what you really think.
Certainly, in the case of Gingrich and Christie, have terrible policy legacies. Gingrich didn't deliver very much at all after taking over the House. I mean, he's a political legacy, but his legislative output is pretty meager.
Unless you count what he did with Bill Clinton.
I mean,
unless you count the Clinton.
The thing you can give Gingrich the most credit for is welfare reform. He boxed Clinton on welfare reform, outside of that, Clinton ran circles around Gingrich.
Yeah, but they balanced the budget, and
after Gingrich way overplayed his hand and got publicly humiliated, having sacrificed all of the goals that he had.
Okay, but you can still argue without Newt there, it doesn't happen. Without Newt, Republicans don't provide the check and balance of Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton, Anyway, I will say this: there's a part of Rudy and Newt that I admire, and it's the joie de vivre, and the they both have this immense energy, this almost
dragon energy, you might say.
What's that?
Dragon energy,
baby. They have a joy. They're happy warriors, actually. I think it's fair to say they're happy warriors. Very happy about being in a war. And I feel like, as someone who is very temperamentally conservative and not at all like them temperamentally, I like sort of studying them as, maybe I could be a little more of that dragon energy.
Well, but
the tiger blood.
But they've all been felled by their egos. Trump gives you, Trump's the kind of guy that berates you and says, I'm a winner at life. I always win. And primarily asserting his winningness, he wins, and therefore we shall be like Trump and just be winners, and that's all it takes. And there are so many other people like Christie, Giuliani, Gingrich, who have been publicly humiliated following a similar logic in life. And it's very possible that Trump's gonna suffer from it too eventually.
It doesn't bring them down, though.
Well, they have a lot of money, and they can go have a nice dinner at a restaurant at the best table whenever they want. But
don't you feel like if you and I had an embarrassment or a setback like they've had, that we may be down for the count? Rudy I think, is getting divorced again. The last I heard.
Yeah. So who knows how actually happy they are inside? It's possible that they totally don't care because they can. Don't
you envy that at some level? Don't you? I feel like we would be in the fetal position if we were embarrassed and humiliated. Don't you? Isn't there a part of you that is deeply envious of people who don't who are just oblivious to
Well, yeah,
there's nothing's embarrassing.
I don't think they are oblivious. Gingrich, Giuliani, Christie, these are all people who can't let go of the fact that they're not fully in the game anymore, and they all keep trying to find a way back in. They all are begging for the scraps from Trump's table, and I'm sure what Giuliani is doing right now is trying to worm his way back into the administration in some way. And
did you see, Bill? Let's go back to the I saw a tweet that where Rudy said. So this is okay. Check me if I'm wrong. We may have to verify this, but a tweet where Rudy said, something to the effect of, "I wish I'd been the attorney general so that I could have investigated Hillary."
Well, I did see that. I tweeted a couple weeks ago. I think you saw this. And so let's go to the videotape here.
Oh, that's right. You did. This is your scoop.
Rudy Giuliani. I mean, this goes back to you. Rudy Giuliani was such a megalomaniac that when he was offered attorney general at the onset of the Trump administration, Giuliani said, "That's not good enough for me. It's Secretary of State or nothing." Yeah. As if Giuliani has any business being Secretary of State. You can make a legitimate argument that he has the credentials to be Attorney General. I mean, his ethics and decency aside, I mean, he was U.S. Attorney. He certainly could be Attorney General based on his resume. He said, that's not good enough for me. If Giuliani had an ounce and a shred of humility and took the offer that was given to him, Jeff Sessions is never Attorney General. Giuliani, being a horrible person, even if they tried to say
he would have never recused.
He would never have recused himself. Even if he should have, he wouldn't have. And you arguably never have a special counsel at all. So for Giuliani to now say, "I wish I was Attorney General," is arguably his fault, his singular fault, that Trump is in the mess that he's in today, outside of the responsibility Trump takes for his own actions.
Now, the big news item, of course, I guess we should talk about it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. Is where Giuliani revealed that Donald Trump's personal money went to pay Michael Cohen to pay off Stormy Daniels, and therefore it was not a campaign contribution violation. This is going to be what everyone's talking about. I don't know how much, uniqueness we can add to this. My only point would be, I think there's a real problem that every time they talk, whether it's Trump tweeting something or Rudy revealing some new information, it opens up avenues for Stormy's attorneys and maybe even for Mueller and others to look into, right?
Remember, the Stormy Daniel, the Michael Cohen case is not Mueller's.
I know, but
it's Southern District of New York.
Right, it's not, but I think that there could be information revealed that might impact other things. Or am I?
Well, that's why I don't. I mean, obviously, having all of Michael Cohen's papers is unnerving to the Trump team. Who know? I mean, they know it's in there. You and I don't know it's in there. I could. It's not crazy for us to assume there's something bad in there they don't want to get out, but we don't really know what that is. What I'm sort of struggling with is, let's say they can prove that the Stormy Daniels payment was a campaign finance violation, possibly even a felony campaign finance violation. Now, Giuliani is saying it's not; it's personal, but that's not at the end of the story. I wouldn't think that would be fatal to Trump. I mean, even, obviously, on paper, you can say if you're in charge of a felony campaign finance violation, that is impeachable. But I don't believe he would get impeached over that. His own base wouldn't flinch over that at all, so he wouldn't get the conviction. And campaign finance violation, their campaign violations happen all the time. They're usually misdemeanors, not felonies. But many politicians, pay the fine and move on, and it's not the end of their career. So I wouldn't think that in and of itself would be that dangerous. But
just to be clear, I just want to be clear. If Michael Cohen personally, which the original story was that Michael Cohen spent his own personal money without being reimbursed to pay off Stormy, and the timing of it was right before an election. Therefore, you could make an argument that Michael Cohen had contributed to Trump's campaign.
Correct.
More money than would be permissible by law.
Correct.
That was the original argument, and
yes.
now Rudy is saying, okay.
Right. So what I don't know is there an end game beyond this campaign finance question? Is there something else in those files that the Trump team is worried about, or that the investigators are pursuing? I don't think we know that. We know that yet. So I hear these stories that this track is more threatening to Trump's viability than the Mueller track. But I just, and that might be true, I just wouldn't think the campaign finance element of it would be that thing that fully takes Trump down. I mean, I hear Avenatti saying Trump's going to resign before this is all over. I mean, Avenatti is obviously one cocky SOB himself, so let's not take his words as being.
I'm putting him in the Rudy Christie
right.
Gingrich camp.
But I just wonder, is there something else there that people on the inside know, the rest of us don't know, that's a bigger bombshell?
Rudy also said something about how, maybe Trump could sit down with Mueller for 2 or 3 hours, but right now with North Korea happening, there's no way that Trump has the time to devote to any sort of, testimony. And remember, there was a point where Trump was saying, "Hey, I want to talk to Mueller. I want to testify."
Well, I mean, there's one set of reporting which is that Trump did want to testify, and then the Cohen raid happened, and then they saw the list of questions, and now he's changed his mind. And I've heard another theory, I think floated by Tubin on CNN, but correct me if I'm wrong, that, come on, Trump never wanted to testify. This is all a dog and pony show to give the impression, to tell his people he really wanted to, until they showed their hands and showed what a horrible witch hunt that is.
It sounds very Trumpian. I mean, that's plausible. That sounds, part of his MO. So.
But the argument that he would love to do it, but he doesn't have the time. I mean, how much? Let's do it on the golf course. Bring Bob Mueller to Mar-a-Lago. You can knock off 2 days of questioning on the links. How much time is spent every day tweeting Fox and Friends? This is the notion that he's just too busy to do this. It's manifestly ridiculous.
Well, since I invoked North Korea, I guess this is a good segue into the debate over should Donald Trump get credit.
Right. Should get the Nobel Peace Prize, which apparently Republicans are all
well,
down
I mean,
with that now.
In fairness, Obama got it for nothing.
Right.
So Trump has actually technically done more. I mean, I don't think he deserves it, and I'm incredibly skeptical that this is going to work out, although there's a chance. But in fairness, Trump has done more than Obama had done at this point.
Those two statements don't make any sense. If you don't even know how it's going to work out.
Yeah, that shows you how undeserved. No, my point is not that Trump deserves it. It's that Obama.
I don't even think Obama would defend him getting the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. I mean,
and yet he got it.
Well, he got it. I mean, it's been reported like they immediately knew there was a political problem, that was way premature. So he's not making that case. But the standard shouldn't be who should get premature Nobel Peace Prizes.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'm not. Yeah. So I'm not arguing that Trump deserves it, but you know where Trump's base is coming from.
Well, on his base, I think just wants to be for things that make liberals mad and the media mad and so forth. But let's. I should say I'm working on a piece on this subject for Real Clear Politics. It's not out yet. It'll probably be out on Monday. So I'm still doing a little bit of my thinking it through. But let's look at this from both sides of the coin. For Republicans to not just say Obama got a peace prize too prematurely, they also say the Iran nuclear deal is a bad deal. It's a bad deal, and that in 10 years from now, the Iranians will be able to restart their nuclear program and nothing will be accomplished. This is a deal that was negotiated for years. It's got tons of legal language. There's tons of paper produced. And the inspections are occurring, and by all accounts, they are complying with the agreement as it stands as of this minute. Not even the Trump people argue that they violated the terms of the agreement itself. But the Republican line is, this is inherently a bad deal, so who cares that they're actually following it? Because by following it, they can follow it for 10 years and then get it, at this point it'd be 7 years because it's been 3 years in place, and then they'll start over from where they were 10 years now. So this whole thing sucks. If that is true, then how is it better that Kim Jong-un has said I'll denuclearize without there being any paper produced whatsoever for what that actually means?
Right.
And for Trump to go out and encourage Nobel chants saying peace is at hand. I mean, the two things just do not square at all. I mean, all of Republican logic in terms of foreign policy up until this point is Ronald Reagan's trust but verify. There is zero verification that has occurred. There's not even an actual deal. But so,
oh yeah.
So
I mean, I'm really skeptical about both. I mean, I don't trust the Iranians, and I sure don't trust the North Koreans. And I think it's entirely plausible that Trump goes, number one, is stupid enough to do it like in Korea. So there's a propaganda sort of thing that, Kim sucks up to him and Trump likes it, that America withdraws from the peninsula, that the North invades the South, and that then what can we do because they've got nukes? I mean, I think that that's an entirely plausible scenario. I think there's a slight chance, I would give it maybe a 10% chance that North Korea is actually afraid that Trump is crazy, and that there's a 10% chance that this actually could work out. But I'm much more skeptical than I am optimistic.
I'm actually more optimistic. I'm more optimistic than skeptical, quite frankly.
Really?
Oh yeah, I am.
Who's that?
But I do want to follow. I want to follow the Republican logic on this, and I want to follow liberal logic on this too. So, if Republicans are now saying Well, you got to admit this is how dare you criticize Trump at this point? How dare you not give him credit? You have to at least agree that it's good that he's taking things this far. And I would give him some credit for that. But let's look at the entirety of the picture here. You have Trump on one end, Trump acting crazy. So you could say he's so crazy and predictable. I want to tie a bow on this so nothing crazy happens. But he's also signaled he really wants to get those troops out of South Korea. He hates South Korea fleecing us for these troops. They don't deserve it. I want to get them out. Which something that North Korea really wants. So he's not just been crazy. He's also done a degree of premature concession himself. At the same time, North Korea has not given up any concession, although they did release or promised to release some hostages. But this was after these initial talks were set up. Before that, North Korea hadn't done anything concession-wise. What they had done is increase their nuclear capability. They strengthened their hand going into the negotiations. Republicans talk about peace through strength. That is what North Korea has done. They have strengthened their negotiating leverage before they agreed to talk. Trump didn't get them to stop anything beforehand. And you have a change in power in South Korea where a conservative president was impeached and forced out of office. A more liberal president came in who ran on a platform of reconciling with North Korea. So you have a confluence of events here. I don't think you can remove Trump's actions from the equation, but his acts are twofold. One that is being a crazy person, and one that is hinting to North Korea, I really want to give you something that you already want. And
Trump wants something too. He likes immediate gratification.
Yes.
And you could see him. Remember, Reagan walks away from the table at Reykjavik. Would Trump have walked away from the table?
Well, I think the Reykjavik story is misunderstood, quite frankly, because they go into Reykjavik. I mean, that was meant to be a pre-summit. That wasn't even meant to be the real summit. It was meant to be kind of like a planning session. And Reagan's people get blindsided that Gorbachev comes in with a real sweeping proposal to cut nuclear arms. Reagan's people scramble because they don't want to be seen as rejecting a generous offer. There's sort of a haggling up that goes on where both sides are opposing various cuts. At one point, Reagan says, I'd be fine if we eliminated all nuclear weapons. And Gorbachev says, yes, let's do that. And then Gorbachev says, of course, you'd have to regulate Star Wars, to a lab for 10 years. And then Reagan gets pissed off, and Reagan insists that Star Wars is going to be good for both of us. I'll share the technology with you. We'll zap all the nuclear weapons from space together. And Gorbachev says, that's ridiculous. I don't believe you're going to do that. Reagan storms out. In the moment, Reagan is treated as the tough guy because he walked away from a good deal on a principle of his. But the aftermath of that is he had signaled to Gorbachev, I actually really want to cut nuclear weapons. I'm really okay with that. And Gorbachev's people then, after they cool down, Gorbachev's people say to him, you know what? Star Wars isn't happening. They're never going to get this going on. You don't have to make this a deal breaker kind of thing. And then Gorbachev goes back to Reagan and says, hey, why don't we do something a little more contained? Let's cut the mid-range INFs, intercontinental nuclear weapons. Reagan jumps at that, and they do that deal. So it ends them doing a deal, in part because Reagan expressed his openness to real cuts. So, I mean, there's peace through strength that as well. So there's a big military buildup before then. There was a degree of pressure on the Soviet economy because of the military buildup. But he had it in him. He had a long-standing desire to eliminate nuclear weapons, either through crazy space lasers or through negotiation. That wasn't appreciated at the time by the left because he was doing evil empire and military-industrial complex and all that stuff. But he actually had it in him. They actually wanted to do a deal. Now, Trump may want to do a deal because he's vainglorious and wants something with his name on it, but it's still a desire to do a deal. And that's not something that liberals should be mad about, quite frankly. And so if he gets there, that is a good thing, and it's a reminder to conservatives that having a bunch of unrealistic preconditions to talking doesn't serve you well. They started this negotiation without any preconditions, and North Korea being a bad actor in the run-up to this, not being a good actor. There was an initial olive branch here.
All right, so I think this is the real hook of your column, in my opinion, is the thing without preconditions. And of course it goes back to Obama versus Hillary. And by the way, Mike Huckabee also. People forget. Mike Huckabee also said that you should negotiate without preconditions. I think the concern that I have is that Trump gets duped, that he is susceptible to flattery and the desire for instant gratification, and the idea of declaring victory, mission accomplished, pulling our troops out, and that really he is just falling right into the trap that North Korea is setting for, that they're basically playing him. And I think it's possible that Trump that this turns out well, but I think it's probably more likely that North Korea outmaneuvers him and manipulates him. Obviously, they've done a psychological anybody would have done a psychological profile of him. You know what buttons to push.
Well, you would normally do that, yes.
I'm sure North Korea is.
Yes. But who knows how good their analysis is? Camp David Accords. I wrote about this way back when, talking about diplomatic surveillance and the NSA. This was my piece in Politico 4 years ago. Jimmy Carter's CIA NSA did surveillance of Israel and Egypt to prepare for the Camp David talks, and they did psychological profiles of Sadat and Begin, and concluded these two personality types are so dissimilar that we can't have them in a room with each other.
Bill, again, I did my dissertation on this. I appreciate you filling in the audience. I'll humor you and allow you to tell these stories. But
so Carter had to shuttle back and forth between the two men because they said if we have them in the same room, they're going to clash and it's all going to fall apart. So there is definite value in knowing your negotiating partners to do a deal, but you want to ideally do it in good faith. Try to get to a good deal, not do it to break your partner and snow them. North Korea, obviously, you can't trust is going to operate on good faith. And I do agree with you. The worst case scenario is Trump agrees to a flimsy deal where North Korea doesn't give up anything, and they pull the troops out, and that leads to geopolitical problems going forward. But I would think that there is no way to fully denuclearize North Korea once they possess nuclear knowledge, just like you cannot in Iran. The premise of the Iran deal is I can't wipe your brains clean, right. But I want to have a inspection regime to keep you honest for a finite period of time, and we'll talk in 10 years and see where we're at. The Republicans take it as it's a free-for-all after 10 years, and the deal actually does not say that. The deal says you can't have nuclear weapons ever, just the inspection regime winds after 10 years, and so it's vague what happens after that. But the initial premise is you're going to have nuclear power. We can't erase this.
We could have stopped it. We could have stopped that. That's where, in defense of Donald Trump, he's inherited this situation where the last three presidents, I would say, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama let this happen. We said that we'll never let North Korea, we'll never let Iran do this, but we weren't really committed to that. And I think now Trump, it's almost shutting the barn door after the horse is out. You know,
I think in both cases we weren't committed to a shooting war to stop it, which you could argue was a reasonable conclusion, that it was not worth a shooting war for these countries who we don't like to have nuclear power, which is different, of course, having nuclear weapons.
I think in the 90s we might have been able to do some sort of...
Well, there was talk. The Clinton people discussed it. And I'm not saying you can't have a legitimate argument for... there were cases of Israel taking out nuclear reactors in the Middle East that
Syria
did not lead to wider war. Although in the case of Iraq, there's an argument that they blew up a reactor, then Iraq took their WMD operation underground, so it didn't actually stop anything. So the Syria case is more of a positive example where it seemed to contain Syria.
That worked out great.
So you could look at it different ways. I'm not saying there's a ultimate correct or incorrect answer to it, but it's not wholly crazy for Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama to say, I don't want them to do this.
No, I totally get kicking the can down the road. And if I was Bill Clinton, you want to hope for, the best, but and then arguably, we had that moment, we had that opportunity, that moment in time.
And at that moment in time, perhaps the incorrect act was to say something you couldn't back up. To say, we're never going to let you do this. If you don't really mean it, you shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
And you should have never gone about it and say, look, let's work with you so you can have some nuclear power, but be in a situation where you don't have nuclear weapons, and let's do this in a more above board way. But look, it was just a hard situation. If you have a bad actor who's determined, they're pretty hard to stop without dropping bombs, and dropping bombs can lead to a lot of unforeseen consequences. So it's just, I think it's easy to say, Clinton, Bush, Obama, you blew this, but it was not an easy situation. You have three different presidents, very different personality types, ideologies, who couldn't solve the problem.
It's just, if you tell me that we will not tolerate this is a no-go, like absolutely, we haven't acted like that. We didn't act like that. So
that's true.
All right, Generalissimo, I'm thoroughly depressed now. Do you want to talk? You want to further depress me by talking about Marco Rubio, or shall we?
Let's just do it quick, because you wrote a nice piece about it. And so Rubio does an interview with The Economist where he bags on the tax cut deal, and says all this stuff about corporations sharing the money with their workers. That's not really happening, and that gets a lot of attention. And then he writes a piece in the National Review saying, well, look, it's still a good bill. It's still good for middle America that we did this. I think it could have been better if you had my version of a child tax credit. And I'm concerned about this or that, but let's not twist my words around and say that I don't like this tax cut bill, because I do. Then you have a reporter at Politico who's an intern who writes up that Rubio's walked back his initial comments. Rubio then makes a snarky tweet, despite what this intern at Politico wrote, this just shows you how hard it is to have a nuanced discussion about public policy. And then now Rubio's being dumped upon for ripping on interns and not owning the fact that he keeps toggling between different viewpoints in his own discussion of the policy.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, I think his comments in The Economist were provocative but entirely defensible. He always had hesitations about this tax reform bill. I think it's fair to say, that I voted for it. I think it's a net positive, but it's not perfect. I think his comments in The Economist were very interesting. He talks about automation, and I think that automation is a huge challenge that we're not really talking about much and not really prepared for. And I also think that although tax cuts, especially cutting the corporate tax to be more competitive globally, is probably a good idea, it's not a panacea. And just because we supply-siders believe that tax cuts worked in the 1980s doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the same impact in a 21st century where there's automation and many other changes. So I think that part of the story here is Rubio saying something that I think was certainly surprising but defensible, then sort of walking it back. And then I think probably the worst sin is the tweet going after the intern, which I think shows really highlights a thin-skinnedness, and also just highlights the fact that he is waffling and wavering. This is the big knock on Rubio, has become the narrative about Rubio, is that he says something bold and then sort of backtracks and gets afraid, and then goes back and forth. So I think that tweet is probably the biggest mistake of all.
I just don't see why. I mean, I have a degree of sympathy for him. Yes, it is hard to have a nuanced discussion of policy. You're voting on bills that are inherently imperfect. Just because you vote yes doesn't mean you like every line in the bill. But you're still.
And he wanted a bigger child tax credit that he fought for and ended up with a compromise. So he was always. I'm not saying that Rubio hasn't changed, but I'm saying that during the tax debate, he was raising some of these concerns about tax cuts for corporations, not necessarily helping out struggling families.
Right. So Rubio should know that if he says something that is in disagreement with a main argument from the president. I mean, Trump loves talking about how corporations are handing out bonuses to everybody. Every anecdotal story that there is of that, he holds it up as proof that the tax cut bill is working. Rubio is choosing to disagree with that. He has to know that when he does that, that's going to generate a lot of attention. It doesn't mean that he has to abandon the entire bill. I mean, he can make a broader case for the bill, saying there's more pros than cons. But he has to own, or he should own, his own comments.
Yeah.
If he wants to walk this line of someone who's not totally orthodox with this party, don't whine and complain when people call attention to that fact. He made the choice to write a panicked defensive op-ed to that in response. Look, he didn't have to do that.
The comments in The Economist were provocative but utterly defensible. And of course, I wrote a column about it. Yeah, people were like, wow, this is interesting. And like this, what's up here? That's par for the course. He's not new. He knows that people, we're going to point out that's a little bit different, or that's unusual, that's odd, but give it a day or two and people are going to move on. He had this need to sort of set the record straight and walk it back to a certain degree. And then I think the tweet was probably the worst. Now, the other interesting thing, Bill, is simultaneously Tom Price was on the record giving a speech where he was warning that the repeal of the individual mandate, which is part of the tax bill, amazingly, and got almost no attention, also amazingly, that probably would raise the price of health care, which is yet, I tie that in with the Rubio story of two people who were ostensibly on the Republican team pushing for really what's their only big legislative achievement is tax reform, and you've got two different sort of players in that at that time who are now cautioning, hey, maybe there's some problems with this.
And Price also had a follow-up statement that was sort of quasi-apologetic and trying to walk it back without actually saying what he said was wrong. And, and what's frustrating to me, and this you speak this in your column too. Here's Rubio and Price having the temerity to talk about policy implications, to admit that what they have done is imperfect, to talk about the real-world implications of their actions, and perhaps come up with ideas to fix them. So that's a healthy impulse on their parts. So once you do it, if you don't stick with it and lean into it, you are undercutting your own goal of having an actual intelligent policy discussion so your party can deliver on good policies that help people and people want to reelect you into office. If you immediately go into a crouching mode and it says, that's not what I really meant. Oh, people are misinterpreting this. Oh, this doesn't mean the whole bill is bad. You have now completely buried the initial point you were trying to make, which was actually an important point to make.
And also, you're basically guaranteeing that you have no fans. I mean, if you go out there and you say, there's a problem, there's a group of people who might rally around you and say, yeah, that's right. And then when you backtrack, it's like the people that were with you now think you're a sellout or a wimp. And the people who were against you, they don't suddenly respect you for waffling, right? So it's like it's really, when you try to, you're really pleasing nobody by doing this. So it's counterproductive just in terms of if all you care about is winning over the crowd, not substance, it's still a bad move.
I mean, Price is out of office, so I don't know why he should care at all. Rubio just won an election in 2016, so he's got a free ride for another 5 years, unless he wants to run for president again, which wouldn't happen until 2024 anyway, probably. I mean, I would think those Republicans who have an appreciation of policy should be thinking about the post-Trump Republican Party. You should be clearly these are people that would like the party to not remain in this state of intellectual atrophy that they are in, and probably could discern this Trump situation is going to collapse on itself. We got to be able to pull ourselves out of the ashes. Let's start talking about real stuff and prepare for that moment. But if you're going to flinch every time you do that, you're never going to get to that place.
I also think that this discussion goes full circle, which is you start to look at these people like Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie and Rubio, and you start to see how flawed they are, in terms of the character and individuals, and some of them that you once had really high hopes for. I don't think this is a problem. I think there are unique challenges on the right, and I wrote a whole book about it. I don't think this is an exclusive thing. I think it's has more to do with politicians and humans than it does with Republicans. But it is a little bit depressing to see, when you follow politics closely, to see these character flaws. And there aren't a lot of people acting courageously and heroically that you can really believe in.
I'm going to end on that uplifting note. What do you got to plug, Matt?
You can believe in, Bill.
What's that?
You know what you can believe in?
What's that?
You can believe in shows like this and in podcasts and long-form discussions that actually, not sound bites, not ratings, but long discussions with smart, interesting people. And that's something I think we should rally behind. And you've got a podcast, Bill.
So just recorded my latest New Books in Politics podcast with Jason Linkins, who is the senior editor at Think Progress. He has a book out called Schoolhouse Wreck, the story of Betsy DeVos.
That's a good title.
By the way,
the Schoolhouse Rock guy just died.
I know, it's very sad.
Which is
very sad.
Weird timing for the book, but...
So I got that, and I got a couple more conservative figures coming up later in the month. I won't reveal them just yet.
We're not going to tease those. I know who some of them are, but I won't tell. I'm having Jonathan Rauch on from Brookings to talk about his new book, The Happiness Curve. Bill, you and I are in the trough. There is a curve, and we are the statistically speaking, our age range is the most depressed and the least happy of any. So, for what that's worth, I just launched a Patreon page. I found, Bill, most of technology is very bad and problematic. Twitter and cable news and Facebook, I think all incentivize fighting and things like that, and dumbing down a little bit, especially social media, I think has some real problems. But some of the only technological things that I think I'm actually kind of excited about now are podcasts. And with Patreon, it's like the old model where if you're an artist or a philosopher or something, you would have patrons who would fund your work, right? So instead of having to have clickbait or photos of Kate Upton riding on a horse to get clicks and ad revenue, you could have people who appreciate and value what you do chip in a little bit. So I just launched a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Matt Lewis, and you can give $1 a month and help me pay for my producer, bandwidth, microphone. I need better equipment, clearly. So I'm going to try this out and see if it works. But it's one of the few, I would say that podcasting and models like Patreon. And we just saw with who was the dude who at the Waffle House who saved, who basically like wrestled a gun away from a shooter,
right?
They set up a GoFundMe page, and I think he raised like $150,000. He's giving to some of the victims. So there are some good things happening out there. We don't talk about them, and I think technology, as much as it's causing problems, there are good things about it. So I'm trying to tap into that, and we'll see how it goes.
All right.
All right.
Till next week. Good to see you, Matt Lewis.
Maybe we need to start funding the DMZ.
Hey, you're welcome to give me your money.
We'll talk to the suits because there's probably already funding.
They're hiding from us.
You can follow us here on Twitter at DMZ Show. You can if you don't want to watch us, and why wouldn't you? I mean, we look great. Let's be honest, we're fashion icons. But you can listen to this podcast too, audibly, on I think Stitcher and iTunes. So
I know.
Check it out. Bill Scher, always a pleasure.
Till next week.
All right, see you guys.